All right, now let's get to this. The thing about these programs, the people that put them in place in local school districts are always smart enough to put their own name on them. The biggest national program of social and emotional learning is called Second Step. There's a good chance if you have a kid in a public school that you've heard of Second Step. Again, they come up with terms like this. What does Second Step mean? It means nothing. They'll use a term that's rather innocuous to then achieve their goals. Second Step, however, has been thrown out of a number of school districts around the country. There's an interesting report that was prepared by a group called the Hechinger Institute. It was very balanced. It had both pro and anti social and emotional learning points in there, and pointing out that it's the latest flashpoint in these school wars across the country where parents are starting to organize and object to something, and it's social and emotional learning, or in this case, the Second Step, that they're objecting to. And the story focused on how in a school district in Utah, a teacher resigned saying she could not bring herself to teach certain crap in the schools. As a result, two mothers decided to look into what the curriculum was. They were horrified themselves. This was in Sandy, Utah. They drew their community's attention to it, and they got the school board to drop it. What often happens here is that parents are not aware of just how far to the left this stuff is. Now, my whole problem with it is, it just strikes me as all the other trends that got to be real, cool to put in place in the schools that all turned out 30 to 40 years later to have been disasters. The new math, creative reading, creative spelling, all of this stuff produced children who couldn't count and kids who can't read and kids who can't spell. But the reason that they come about is, again, go back to the money thing. If you want to come up with a new thing, you get to sell it. There's no money to be made in continuing to do the same kind of educational curriculum we always have, because it's already been written. Everybody's been trained on it. There's a parent who's starting to raise concerns about the fact that Second Step is all over the Cedarburg School District. Now, Cedarburg is a school board whose majority of its members campaigned as conservatives and were elected. And the parent has expressed to me the difficulty that she's had in trying to get information on some of these decisions or when anybody approved this. The president of the school board is a guy named Leach. I sent him an email. It was to his school thing. He probably didn't get it by airtime, so he hadn't responded to me as of airtime. But I asked, did you ever approve this? Are you even familiar with it? And again, I'm tired of hearing from school board members who don't even seem to know what's going on in the schools. If left-wing curriculum is being taught in the schools, then you either authorized it or you haven't made the people in charge stop it. I also sent an email to the superintendent in Cedarburg. He's brand new. I asked him, when was this approved and by whom? Was it approved by the school board? If not, was it approved by administrators? And if so, when and who were they? I'd like to know which administrators decided to take away teaching time in Cedarburg to go all lefty goo-goo gaga on Second Step. They don't like to answer these questions, which is pretty apparent because I haven't gotten an answer to the question. The communities where it's possible to stop these things are communities like Cedarburg, and the next issue that we're going to be discussing after we come back after the break, which is from Oak Creek. Because these are communities where there's still a fair number of conservatives in the community. They may raise pressure. Wauwatosa seems to me to be a lost cause. I have no reason to believe that Wauwatosa schools aren't going to get worse and worse and worse, that the test scores aren't going to continue to crash, that there aren't going to be more fights, that it's not going to just devolve into a mini MPS to the west. I just have no reason to have any confidence that it's going to get any better, given the fact that the school board and the school administrators are all people that are putting in place the very policies that always lead to this disaster. The same ideology that ruined Milwaukee Public Schools is now ruining Wauwatosa Public Schools. There are highly incompetent, ideologized people in there who have abandoned the things that work in a school system and now can't even come to realize that when you have open brawls going on in the schools, that this is a matter to have police come in and make arrests and get the individuals causing the trouble out of the school. Since they're not going to do it, it will continue to erode. But Cedarburg isn't a lost cause. The voters have made it clear they want a conservative school board. They had back-to-back elections there where some candidates ran as liberals, some ran as conservatives. But just electing a conservative school board isn't enough if the conservative school board isn't going to run the schools. And if you're a conservative school board, one of the things that you have to accept is that most of the people that you supervise, the people who work in the schools, are liberals. The parent who contacted me said after a few conversations, it's a she, I won't go anything beyond that, she learned that it was never approved by the school board. Something as significant as a radical embracement of a total educational curriculum and concept should be approved by the school board. I don't think every last thing the teacher's going to teach the kids about Pakistan today has to be approved by the school board. But if you're going to embrace an overall teaching concept, especially one as volatile as this, the school board should have to approve it. And I don't mean one of these rubber stamps. I mean one in which school board members ask serious questions, that the public is invited to come in, that all of the curriculum materials are put available online so that people can view them and decide whether or not this is something that you should embrace. So anyway, we're going to pay attention to this and see whether or not the new superintendent of Cedarburg has any explanation as to how this is going on without anybody knowing about it. And I would also challenge them to take every single teaching material they have in this whole area of Second Step and put them online so that people can dive into this. And the parents need to start asking their kids about this whole Second Step thing. What have they been telling you in school about it? Because the thing that happens with all of these concepts they describe, we're just teaching the kids to be empathetic, etc., is that in actual practice, the devil being in the details, it's much more volatile than that. But more importantly, my point is this. We lost 2 years because of COVID with the outrageous decision to do hybrid learning or make the kids and teachers wear masks so nobody could hear anything and nobody was paying any attention. And the panic nature of some kids in school, some kids not in school. We saw how the test scores have crashed. We've seen all the problems that have occurred. We've got to catch up on the academics. We are running the risk of ruining this generation because we allowed COVID phobia to overtake education, and we allowed very selfish teachers to put their own fears of getting COVID ahead of their responsibility to educate kids. If you're afraid of getting sick at your job, find another career. To me, it has been nauseating that you can see individuals who'd be willing to go to work at a Walgreens dealing with every matter of the public wandering around and coming in and coughing all over the place. But some $65,000 a year school teacher with a massive pension was afraid to come in school and deal with a bunch of kids. It just was nauseating to me that you didn't have school boards tell them, you lazy slug, get the hell into work. But we didn't. And now we run the risk of making it worse by not understanding that we have lost 2 full years and we need to get the nose back to the grindstone and focus on academics. And the more they go into whatever this new trendy thing that somebody bought is less time on the academics. When we come back after the break, another area of curriculum where we're beginning to see exactly the duplicitousness of school administrators, even in districts where political content is banned. Oak Creek Franklin School District, it's mostly Oak Creek. Franklin has its own school district, but the portion of a little bit of the eastern chunk of Franklin is in the Oak Creek Franklin School District, but Oak Creek Franklin School District is mostly Oak Creek and a small sliver of Franklin. Anyway, in that school district, the school board has passed a policy that says you can't have political materials in the school. Guess what the schools are filled with, Paul? Political materials. And parents have been drawing attention to it and some of the smut that are in the schools. And we have another case here of whether or not a school board is going to address the fact that the superintendent has taken their rules and said, okay, you pass this. I'm not going to do a damn thing about it. It's, again, another case of what happens when, even when you try to do the right thing, how you can't trust the people within the public schools. You wonder how libraries become porno centers. You wonder how when you walk into these schools, there are more political signs up there on the walls and more political statements than you see in a neighborhood 1 week before an election. And the answer is this. When I go into the bank, I just don't expect to see one banker saying MAGA and another one saying that the communists are great. You don't expect any statement in there. You just want to go and do your banking, and the school should be the same thing. So when I was a kid, when I was in Catholic school, there are 2 things in the schools. There was flag. In the grade schools, there were flags and crucifixes, and in the high school, there was just the flags. We didn't need anything else. I'm sure there were political beliefs all over the map back then, but we accepted the notion that the school wasn't the place to come in and act like a bully and throw your ideological and intellectual and moral superiority around all over the place. So the challenge on Oak Creek will be, are you going to allow this crap to continue, or are you going to crack down on the selfish and insolent people who've decided to behave as bullies by taking a classroom or its office space that they have charge of and forcing kids to stare at their left-wing beliefs? That's a good enough tease, isn't it? That's better than my puking all over the thing that I did with regard to Cedarburg, right? Standing up for Milwaukee, this is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show on News Talk 1130 WISN. A lot of people like the haggling with the car dealer. You know why they like the haggling with the car dealer? Because they're convinced that they beat the car dealer out of something. And the reality, obviously, is for the ones that do haggle, some do and the others don't. You never beat the dealer out of anything because they wouldn't sell you the car. But some people clearly would get a car for lower prices than others. But I think everybody thinks they did. Anyway. Standing up from Milwaukee, this is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show on News Talk 1130 WISN. We teased this topic, and because we're on a continuum here, I don't need a lot of time to go through it. The next area that's going on in the schools that has been the subject of controversy is both political and sexual content within the schools. Now, in Oak Creek, they've had issues over both of them that have been raised in the last couple of weeks when some parents and teachers have been drawing attention to lurid material in the school library. In one case, it was the Oak Creek East Middle School library, where material was presented online by parents who drew attention to it, and many members of the community were appalled that this would go on. I want to make a brief comment about that, then get to the larger point. It's always amazing to me how things that you can't say, that people would be horrified if you spoke them, you can put in a song and sing them. It's just true, though. I mean, the use of the N-word over all sorts of raps, just any number of things in which the vulgar, bleep this and bleep that and so on that are in music that you would never allow a comedian or anyone to be able to say. Well, there's another example of this. Imagine your kid going over to the neighbor's house, 15, 16-year-old kid, and going over to the neighbor's house, and the neighbor decides to show your kid all these lurid books with nude objects in them and extremely graphic sexual content. You'd think your neighbor was dangerous. It's completely inappropriate for a stranger to be showing material like that to a child. Yet, the school librarian in the school can do the exact same thing, and we consider that to be fine. Well, you can't object to that being in there. Really, what is the difference? Why is it okay for a school to put a bunch of porn in the hands of kids, but it's not okay for the neighbor to do this as well? But the neighbor might be a pervert. Like there aren't any teachers that have been perverts? The answer is, if the material's not appropriate, the material's not appropriate. And if a parent decides it is appropriate, the parent can get the same material for their kid. But you err on the side of not putting lurid, illicit material in the hands of kids. The reason that we're now finding out that this crap is in school libraries all over the place is, I love the snowball effect because it always holds to be true. Some parents started to discover this largely during COVID. When there was online learning and so on, parents started to realize that a lot of the stuff that was in the schools is horrifying. And one of the discoveries was some of the garbage in the school libraries. What's happened as a result of that is all sorts of other parents all over the country are starting to look and see what's in their school libraries. In other words, if the first few cases, you know what this is like? This is good. This might not be good, but I think it's good. You know what this is like? Something that happened in 1849. See, now this is something that you could actually get, but I know you won't. No, Wisconsin is 1848. So I said 1849. Well, something happened in 1849. I don't want anybody to try to help you out. Where's Dave Michaels? Don't let him pipe in with his, well, why do we call the San Francisco 49ers the San Francisco 49ers? It has to do with 1849. What? Gold Rush, that's right. See, the Gold Rush started when, I think, was it Sutter's Mill? Sutter discovered a little bit of gold out here. And immediately, thousands fled to Nevada, got out to Nevada and California into that region to look for more gold. The notion was because they found some gold here, maybe, the old saying, there's gold in them there hills. Maybe there's gold all over the place out there. That's what's happened with regard to vulgar material in school libraries. Once a few parents discovered them, you've got parents all over the country looking for the same thing. That is a good analogy. I wasn't sure it would be until I said it. I think that's exactly what this has been. This is gold, but of a negative kind. The belief that, well, it wouldn't just be this one school in Maine that has a bunch of smut in there. Maybe it's in school libraries all over the place, and indeed it is. In the meantime, there's the separate issue of how the schools have become indoctrination zones in which we've gone from simply the content being spread by the teachers to the fact that there are logos and flags and politically loaded statements, extremely controversial statements all over the schools, and it ties into the embrace by the schools of radical and, I think, perverted views on sexuality and gender. This idea, the tree analogy that they're giving now, that DPI has for preschool kids, that we are to think upon all people as trees, and the tree is going to grow into a boy or a girl as it matures and develops. Not that it already is a boy or a girl, but we have to watch it develop to see what it is. It's perverted, it's rot, it's offensive, and even if it isn't any of those things, it's clearly a point of view. And it's a point of view that not everyone holds, meaning it shouldn't be in the schools. And it doesn't have anything to do with tolerance and diversity or acceptance that people want to be able to claim. It's a specific belief system that you're trying to force on a bunch of other people, most of whom do not yet buy into it. I happen to think that gender is real. Now, I contacted the Oak Creek School Superintendent because they've got a controversy that's going on down there. They have in place a policy that bans political statements in the schools. Yet, the Oak Creek schools are garbage pits of leftist political material, as I have gotten from pictures that have been sent to me by a few kids, parents, and others that are agitating the community over this. And the explanation, of course, is that all of the liberal stuff isn't political, but any conservative stuff was. So I contacted the school superintendent. His name is Dan Yannerl. And he did get back to me, and I asked him, are the rainbow flag posters that are all over your school political? And he says no. I happen to think it's one of the most powerful and loaded political symbols that we have. Most symbols are powerful or they wouldn't be a symbol. The rainbow flag that's showing up at Oak Creek and in most other places has a different line or different sets of words near each color of the rainbow. And one of the words is one of the most loaded terms that we have right now, which is safe spaces. Safe spaces has been interpreted that all children, regardless of the way they live their lifestyle, have to be allowed to do so, and therefore no one can express any. You have to use for example, the pronoun that the individual chooses. So you may have a biological girl there. We're going to force all the other students to refer to that person as a male because that's her choice. Otherwise, we're invading her safe space. It's loaded terminology. The left is always very good at grabbing on symbols and grabbing words, and they're very good at choosing words that are rather innocuous while communicating a meaning that is much more divisive than that. Choice, the perfect example. Choice is their belief that you should be able to kill babies. That's their belief. They do believe that they don't believe that they don't believe abortion is killing a baby. I do, but they use the term choice. They use an innocuous word to come up with a divisive concept. And the same thing is true of all of these things. Anyway, the principal of Oak Creek says that, well, the rainbow flag is not a political statement. Well, then there are no political statements. I know what the rainbow flag says to me. It's that you're supposed to accept the leftist point of view with regard to gender, homosexuality, and pretty much any notion of what the current contemporary views are of the LGBTQ plus community. And given the fact that we keep adding letters to this, it means that there are new agendas and new beliefs that are associated with it. Well, whether you agree with the statement or not, it's a political statement. A political statement is a statement that is made that deals with one's ideology or belief system. Ideology being, for example, somebody who prefers turkey to chicken, that's not an ideology. But somebody who prefers aggressive development of fossil fuel as opposed to the Green New Deal, that's an ideology. That's an ideological belief, and any symbols that would be associated to them would be political. So anyway, I asked him, well, what about the MAGA flag or a MAGA banner? Could a teacher put a MAGA banner up? He's, no, that's political. The thing about MAGA is the term Make America Great Again is, in my mind, very much like Black Lives Matter. Rather non-controversial, both statements. Of course, Black Lives Matter. And other than a few lefties, what's wrong with wanting to make America great again? We may disagree what great is, but they're both positive and rather innocuous statements. But we all know that they are associated with movements. And you know, the Oak Creek superintendent said, look, make America great again was Donald Trump's campaign slogan. So that's clearly political, so we can't allow it. But the rainbow flag, who disagree with that? That's not political. So my conclusion here is that the way it's going to be implemented in Oak Creek is anything that's leftist isn't political, but anything that a conservative says is political. There are two things concerning about that. One, the superintendent is making a mockery of the school district's policy, and B, that the school board can't trust its superintendent. Now, clearly, the superintendent only wants to enforce the policy against conservative things. Why? Aside from what his own beliefs are, he's got a staff that consists primarily of liberals because they're teachers that work in the schools. And I'll admit, how would you like to be a conservative teacher in a public school? You'd have an insurrection. So the path of least resistance is to allow belligerent faculty members to act out their leftist points of view while working. So they put up their badge and say, well, we're just trying to be inclusive and welcoming. That's right. The gay kid just isn't welcome in school if they don't see the damn rainbow hanging in front of everybody's classroom. Give me a break. Gay people, trans people, people of every possible, they walk around almost everywhere in society and are welcome in almost all of them without having to see a rainbow flag somewhere. It's just a way for the faculty member to show off their ideology and get in the face knowing that some people, including some students and a handful of teachers, disagree. But it's political. And to say it isn't political is idiotic. Whether you agree with it or not, the fact that you can agree or disagree proves that it's political. It's political. So either bad nothing or bad all of it. They have a policy that says you can't do it. Now, I understand the teachers will then raise a stink just as they did in Waukesha and as they did in Kettle Moraine, and eventually they lose, they cry, they go back to their rattles and realize, okay, I'm not going to complain too much because I'm paid extremely well to be a lousy school teacher in here, and all they're going to do is say I can't put up the sign, but I still keep getting a paycheck even though my kids' test scores are going to decline. I guess I don't have too much to complain about, especially since I get to retire at 70% of my pay when I'm 56. Paul, this isn't easy to be able to rattle that off.